Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the USA, English language, released in the year 2012, directed by Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson, and this film is called Resolution. So Resolution is about this main character. He's got a long lost friend that he hasn't seen for a very long time who's actually a drug addict. So at the start of the film, this main character gets a video from his friend and that gives the main character the impression that the friend is asking for help. And so this main character decides to leave his girlfriend behind for a few days so he can travel out to the remote countryside in this cabin where this drug addict lives, and he's going to try and convince his old friend to go and get help. But then things are going to be very complicated when strange events occur. Those strange events start to make this main character question his own sanity and whether or not what he's actually seeing is actually happening. And so not only does he have to try and save his friend, but he also has to try and help himself. So whether or not he can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Resolution. Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson are definitely two of the most exciting directors going around. Now, for me, they haven't created a brilliant movie yet. Now, they made a film called Spring that I could appreciate for how good it was made and how good looking that film was and the symbolisation that movie was, and integrating the symbolism with the horror. I thought was just something I hadn't seen before, and so that had problems that I prevented it from being a masterpiece, but I could still appreciate it for what it was. They've also got another movie called The Endless that I haven't seen yet. I've got it on DVD. I'll be watching that very soon and then reviewing it, but I can't comment on that. But Resolution, I thought to myself, okay, what am I going to get with this movie? Is that, all right, there were moments in Spring that made these directors very exciting and made me actually want to go out and track down their other works. And so Resolution came before Spring, and so I was thinking to myself, okay, well, being the creative directors that they are, what am I getting myself into? So I read the synopsis, I saw the trailer, and I thought, all right, well, this is definitely my kind of film. After watching Resolution, I will say that it does share the same sort of problems that Spring had, but what I liked about this movie the most is the attention to detail as far as expanding these characters in a way that are very relatable. And if you have relatable characters, all of a sudden you have that sense of realism, you have that sense of connection, so when strange things start to happen, the fear factor is elevated. So if you've got someone who's just cannon fodder, he's very annoying, you want to see them die in a horrible way, it eliminates a lot of suspense. And so when this movie, straight away you get the sense that this main character is a very caring person because he's travelling all the way out to help his friend. And when he meets his friend, this drug addict, yes, he is relying on horrible things, and the way he acts in certain events are very deplorable, but he has a very likeable personality. And this is the connection, is that a lot of us know someone who is dependent on drugs and how destructive that those drugs can be, and almost turn a person, basically turn someone into a completely different person. And so not necessarily being a bad person, but the drugs making that bad person make bad choices. And so that's exactly what this movie does, is that, alright, this is a guy who you wouldn't trust. But why wouldn't you trust him? Is he a terrible person, or he just has a terrible sort of problem? And that's ultimately what it is, a terrible problem, not a terrible person. So the directors give you an insight into a very damaged man, and you could see why this main character would befriend this guy. This guy has a very good sense of humour. This guy is actually caring. But there are moments where you can actually see the drugs take over, and the desperation he has behind that drug dependency is making him do these things, that make these decisions, these terrible decisions. And so for once, you've got a film that is not demonising someone because of their drug dependency, but showing you how controlling a drug dependency can be. So you've got a very good relationship, a friendship between these two main characters that just makes it very, very relatable. And so I thought, all right, well, these characters are characters that I really, really like. And so when strange things start to occur, I didn't want to see bad things happen to them. So it does elevate the suspense. It does elevate that care factor. And so if you want to see someone die horribly, the fear factor and the suspense isn't working as well as it could. And that's ultimately the biggest killer to a lot of horror films, is that if you don't have a likeable character, slasher films are popcorn films because you don't care about these people. But if you actually have a little bit more attention to these people and can kind of evolve these people to a sense of realism, maybe slashers would be taken more seriously. Maybe you could get a little bit more fear in that. And so I just think that Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson really understand what it is to create a sense of realism, create a sense of relatability, and that relatability in turn is going to make the horror even better. And so the horror in this movie, I thought they could have elevated the horror a little bit more, which is my criticism of Spring, is that although the characters in Spring, once again, were phenomenal, and that's obviously these directors' trademarks, is that they can actually create really likeable people. But I just thought, as far as banking it on a horror film, it needed that sense of elevation. It needed that punch. It didn't really have that, aggressive punch, which, they don't really try to do that. It is a very subtle sort of creepiness that basically absorbs the viewer, but it's more a sense of mystery. And that was my problem with Spring, is that yes, it is a mystery, and the mystery is very good. It asks a lot of questions that beg answering, and they do answer all these questions, and that sustains the interest. But if you go in there expecting a straight out horror film, I definitely think you're going to be disappointed, and so be very careful of that. But for me, I just thought there were areas in this movie that could have elevated and could have actually given it a bit more life, whereas this, it struck me as a character study. It's a drama about friendship, and the horror aspects are a symbolization of the drug dependency, but there is a supernatural sort of twist to this film that actually takes you off guard right at the end. But I just thought, all right, there's a slow level of monotony to the horror aspects, and those horror aspects, it prevents it from being a masterpiece. But although it's not a brilliant film, I still couldn't get it out of my head, which is very similar to Spring. And the reason why you can't get it out of your head is because the very fine details have been paid attention to, and because they're built on those fine details, it lasts in the memory. And basically, if you have someone who's very likable, it's going to stay in your memory. Is that, all right, I can't disconnect myself from the situation, therefore by the time the end credits roll, I'm still going to be thinking about it. And so this is ultimately what these directors do very, very well. Resolution, as far as the look is concerned, I thought the cinematography was very well done. I thought, as I said, the script is phenomenal, the characters are absolutely outstanding, and there are some creepy elements to the film that actually, it's a very slow burn, and it does evolve, and it strikes an explosion at the end that will take you off guard, and it's definitely a film that you're going to analyse after you finish watching it. But as I said, there's that level of monotony where I thought it could have really elevated and really illuminated the sky, but it can't quite do that, and so it can't quite hit that home run. It basically gets to third base without quite getting to that home run, but it's still an indication that these directors are absolutely fantastic at what they do, and as a result of that, I'm going to give Resolution 3.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.